Here are 3 things you can do to help your son or daughter from a parenting perspective. Number 1 is don't scare them before a big match. And it's easy to do. We generally are more nervous for our kids than we are ourselves. As a wrestler, I know I was more nervous when my brothers had a big match than I was when I had a big match. And I think from a parenting perspective, the same is true. I've been extremely nervous for my son and daughter in sports, and I try my best to hide that. Sometimes it's difficult though, right? So make sure that you act. We have a phrase in our room. We tell our athletes, act like you're the best. Act like you're the best, because something very powerful happens inside, a calming effect when you act like you're the best, right? And people say, well, that's an arrogant thing to say. Well, just Google act as if. Like a million things popped up. You're supposed to act as if you know things are going to work out for you. Act as if you're going to land on your feet. Act as if, you're going to win the match and or, good things are going to happen. So, a parent should not, when they're trying to talk yourself off the ledge, just go sit in the stands and do that yourself. Don't talk to your kids, because really what you're doing is you are making them nervous and giving them a little panic attack before the match. Second thing you should do is teach your kids what they should be thinking about before a match. There's only one thing you should be thinking about. Well, once you establish a game plan, right? And establishing a rough, loose game plan, if possible, if you know the wrestler, that is, and many times we do. Establishing a rough, loose game plan is always a way to calm your nerves, right? You might be nervous for the math test, but if you study really hard for 30 minutes before you take the test, or even days leading up to the math test, you're probably quite a bit more calm and relaxed, right? So a rough game plan, that should be done beforehand. But right before the match, all they should be thinking about is this: I'm going to score first, or no one does, right? That's it. I'm going to score first and ride hard. That's what I tell my kids. If you can score first, you get the ride out. We'll worry about the rest of it later. Because you have to worry about the rest of it later. We can't worry about the finals before we win the first match. And we can't worry about second period or what's going to happen later until we have taken care of what needs to happen now. I need to score first and get the ride out. That's it. So that's all your athlete should be thinking about is, I need you to wrestle smart and tough, get the first takedown, get the ride out, all right? After that, we'll worry about the rest of it later. And if you can teach your athletes to adopt that mindset, now they're only thinking about one thing. There's some phrase, I don't know, it's like some Zen phrase or something I saw some time ago. It said, when the mind is occupied with the 1/10, it is not occupied with the 9/10. So you don't want to have a scattered thoughts bouncing around between 10 thoughts. You want to only focus on one thought. And you might as well think about the most important thought, which is the first takedown. So teach your athletes how to do that. Drill them on it, quiz them on it, and that will change everything. Last thing you can do is help them to get the necessary tools and skills. Right? Sometimes you see parents, unfortunately, at youth tournaments getting mad and upset with their kids. And those of us like myself, who I'm probably an expert as far as from a coaching standpoint, was an All-American at Oklahoma State, so did better than most people, but I'm certainly not a 2-time Olympic champ or something, but still have some success from an athletic standpoint, and not from a coaching standpoint, certainly do. So here I am, probably knows some of the answers anyway. I can't go to that strange dad who's mad, who just threw his clipboard down and screamed at his kid and say, listen, dude, your son is right-handed but has his left foot forward, right? That's a left-handed wrestling stance and he's a right-handed wrestler. I can't do that. There's sometimes so many blaring weaknesses that the wrestler has, or he's just simply lost, right? From a technique standpoint. And that's no one's fault necessarily, right? He might even have awesome coaches, but the coaches are inundated with 40 beginners. So the kids who have 3 to 5 seasons of wrestling, or maybe even a couple of years of year-round wrestling, they get thrown off in the corner. It's almost worse being good and experienced in youth wrestling because you get ignored the worst, and it's not the coach's fault. Their volunteer coaches never wrestled before. You got these 2 coaches. Some of them, even themselves, don't really know a lot about it because they haven't had a wealth of wrestling experience. Either way, whatever reason there is, sometimes these kids are just like underprepared. So make sure your kids are prepared and just make sure that they master the core skills of wrestling. Make sure they get some off-season wrestling time, and make sure that you learn to notice the big changes or the big techniques and things of wrestling. Right? Here's a few. You shouldn't let your opponent read your shirt. You shouldn't be in a big, tall stance like, I call it the 1942, right? The 1942 wrestling stance. That doesn't work. You want to bend over at the waist. Your opponent shouldn't be able to read your shirt. You should put your face down and look at your opponent through the tops of your eyebrows. You don't keep your head up and look forward. A lot of people say, get your head up. And the little boys out there wrestling like this, or even the high school kids, that's wrong, right? You don't want to be in a squared stance unless you're circling. 98% of the match, you should be in an attack stance. So there's a few things you should be looking for. Also, when they're starting in referee's position, they shouldn't be breathing in the far ear, especially if they're going to attack the back ankle or arm chop. They need to be breathing in the far ear only to get their legs in or to look for cradles, right? So sometimes we start with our chest too high. You want to start with your chest low on the back. So there's a few things you should be looking out for, as well as the left foot forward stance for a right-handed wrestler. That sometimes I see the kids lacking the necessary skills and their parents are frustrated. And like I said, guys like me or any coach, we can't say anything because then you just look like a know-it-all. You just got to sit and watch. And, I think the parents who help their kids to get the necessary core basic skills, they're doing everyone a good favor. So good luck to you parents out there.